Trust is fragile, a delicate thread that binds us to those who promise healing. When Sarah Miller walked into Dr. Vance's office that rainy Tuesday afternoon, she carried with her the broken pieces of her past, hoping they could be reassembled into something beautiful. She had no idea that the very hands she'd entrusted with her healing would be the ones to inflict the deepest wounds. This isn't just another therapy horror story. This is a journey through the darkest corridors of psychological manipulation, where the line between help and harm becomes dangerously blurred. What happens when the person sworn to heal you starts breaking you down instead? When the safe space you've created becomes the very place where your autonomy is stripped away? This is the story of Sarah, her therapist Dr. Vance, and a relationship that would forever change how she viewed trust, healing, and herself. Sarah Miller had always been the person others turned to, the shoulder to cry on, the listening ear, the unwavering support system. But after her mother's sudden death and a devastating breakup that left her questioning her worth, the strong facade began to crack. Panic attacks seized her in the middle of grocery stores. Insomnia became her nightly companion. The woman who once navigated life with quiet confidence now struggled to make the simplest decisions. When a colleague gently suggested therapy, Sarah initially resisted. "I help others. I don't need help," she told herself. But after a particularly frightening panic attack that sent her to the emergency room, she finally acknowledged the truth. She was drowning, and she couldn't save herself. The referral to Dr. Ethan Vance came highly recommended, a specialist in grief and trauma with 20 years of experience and an office filled with credentials. Sarah remembered the relief she felt scheduling that first appointment, believing she'd finally found a lifeline. Dr. Vance's office felt like a sanctuary, warm lighting, comfortable furniture, and the gentle sound of a water fountain creating an atmosphere of immediate calm. He greeted Sarah with a warm smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, creating an immediate sense of ease. "You're safe here," he told her during that first session, his voice carrying the perfect blend of authority and compassion. And Sarah believed him. The first few months of therapy seemed miraculous. Dr. Vance listened intently, validated her experiences, and offered insights that illuminated the darkest corners of her pain. He introduced techniques that helped quiet her anxiety and encouraged her to reconnect with parts of herself she'd abandoned. "You're doing the work many people avoid their entire lives," he told her, and Sarah glowed under his approval. She began sleeping better. The panic attacks became less frequent. She started sharing her progress with close friends, crediting Dr. Vance with saving her life. "He sees me in a way no one ever has," she confided to her best friend Emma, who smiled but couldn't quite shake a nagging concern. The shift happened so gradually that Sarah couldn't pinpoint when the therapeutic relationship began to change. Perhaps it was when Dr. Vance started extending their sessions, insisting she needed extra care, but charging for the additional time. Or maybe it was when he began texting her outside of sessions, first with therapeutic check-ins, then with personal observations about her progress, and eventually with comments about her appearance or his personal life. The boundaries between professional and personal blurred like watercolors bleeding into one another. "You're one of my special patients," he would say, creating a false sense of exclusivity that made Sarah feel simultaneously special and uncomfortably singled out. She noticed he'd begun to criticize her friendships, suggesting that certain people in her life triggered her trauma responses or didn't understand her healing journey. Emma, once her closest confidant, became characterized as jealous of your progress and threatened by our therapeutic connection. Isolated and increasingly dependent on Dr. Vance's validation, Sarah didn't recognize the warning signs unfolding before her. 6 months into therapy, Sarah's world had shrunk considerably. Her sessions with Dr. Vance had increased to 3 times weekly, draining her savings but justified as necessary for breakthrough work. He'd convinced her to share her personal journal with him, a journal that increasingly focused on her growing emotional attachment to him. When she expressed discomfort about certain therapeutic techniques, he would sigh deeply and say, "This resistance is your trauma speaking. Don't you trust me yet?" The question always landed like a punch to her stomach, triggering immediate guilt and compliance. Sarah found herself constantly seeking his approval, measuring her worth through his validation. She stopped making decisions without first considering what Dr. Vance would say. The therapist who was supposed to guide her toward independence had created a relationship of dependency so profound that Sarah could no longer distinguish between her own thoughts and his influence. Her friends noticed the changes, how she quoted him constantly, canceled plans for last-minute, emergency sessions, and seemed to be fading before their eyes. The breaking point came during a session when Sarah, gathering her courage, questioned a particularly invasive line of questioning about her sexual history. Dr. Vance's warm demeanor instantly vanished, replaced by cold disappointment. "After all this time, you still don't understand the process," he said, his voice taking on an edge she'd never heard before. "Perhaps you're not as committed to healing as I thought." Sarah left the session feeling shattered, convinced she'd failed not just as a patient but as a person. That night, unable to sleep and overwhelmed with anxiety, she called Emma. Between sobs, Sarah recounted recent sessions, the inappropriate texts, the financial strain, the isolation. There was a long silence before Emma spoke. "Sarah," she said gently, "this isn't therapy. This is abuse." The words hung in the air, impossible yet undeniable. For the first time in months, Sarah felt a flicker of clarity breaking through the fog. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. Not with her, but with the relationship she'd believed was saving her. Sarah spent the next week in turmoil, alternating between defending Dr. Vance and questioning everything about their therapeutic relationship. She began researching ethical guidelines for therapists, finding violation after violation in his conduct. Still, breaking away seemed impossible. The fear was overwhelming. Who would she be without him? How could she trust her own perceptions after months of having them subtly undermined? When she missed a session without explanation, Dr. Vance bombarded her phone with messages ranging from concern to anger to guilt-inducing reminders of all he'd done for her. Each message confirmed what Sarah was slowly beginning to accept. This relationship had become dangerous to her well-being. With Emma's support, she consulted another therapist for a professional opinion. The new therapist's face grew increasingly grave as Sarah shared her experience. "What you're describing," she explained gently, "is a textbook case of therapeutic abuse and boundary violations. This isn't what healing looks like." Those words, direct, unambiguous, professional, broke the spell. Sarah left the consultation with something she hadn't felt in months: certainty. Ending the relationship with Dr. Vance proved as difficult as leaving an abusive partner. He cycled through tactics, gaslighting, "You're misinterpreting everything," guilt, "After all I've invested in you," threats, "No one else will understand your unique needs," and finally, when those failed, a chilling professional detachment as if their intense relationship had been entirely in her imagination. Sarah drafted a formal termination letter with the guidance of her new therapist and filed an ethics complaint with the state licensing board. The investigation revealed Sarah wasn't alone. 5 other former patients came forward with similar experiences, patterns of manipulation so similar they could have been following a script. The licensing hearing was brutal, forcing Sarah to relive every boundary violation, every manipulation, every moment of exploitation. But as painful as the process was, each testimony strengthened her resolve. This wasn't just about her healing anymore. It was about protecting others from similar harm. Recovery from therapeutic abuse proved more complex than recovering from her original trauma. Sarah had to unravel which thoughts were truly hers and which had been planted. She had to rebuild trust, not just in therapists, but in her own perceptions and judgments. Her new therapist, Dr. Chen, approached their work together with transparent boundaries and constant collaboration. Therapy should empower you, not make you dependent, she explained during their first session. My goal is to work myself out of a job. The contrast between the two therapeutic approaches couldn't have been more stark. Slowly, Sarah began reclaiming her autonomy. She reconnected with friends she'd pulled away from, rebuilt her financial security, and began speaking out about her experience. The healing wasn't linear. Some days the sense of betrayal felt overwhelming, the violation of trust too significant to overcome. But there were also moments of profound clarity and strength, reminders that she had survived not only her original trauma but also the exploitation of that trauma by someone who should have known better. 2 years after filing the complaint, Sarah received notification that Dr. Vance's license had been permanently revoked. The validation was bittersweet, justice had been served, but it couldn't erase the damage done. By then, Sarah had connected with other survivors of therapeutic abuse, forming a support network that understood the unique betrayal of being harmed by a helping professional. Her experience had transformed her. She returned to school to study ethics in mental health care, determined to help reform systems that allowed predatory practitioners to thrive. In her spare time, she volunteered for a peer support line for those who had experienced boundary violations in therapy. The most dangerous aspect of therapeutic abuse, she would explain to callers, is that it happens in the context of healing. The very relationship meant to help you become more yourself instead bends you into someone you don't recognize. Sarah never regretted seeking help, only that she hadn't been better prepared to recognize when help became harm. She learned that true healing never demands surrender of autonomy, never isolates, never requires unquestioning trust. If this story resonated with you, please know you're not alone. Thousands of people experience boundary violations in therapeutic relationships each year, often suffering in silence due to shame, confusion, or fear. Your experience matters, and your voice deserves to be heard. Like this video to help our algorithm reach others who might be questioning their therapeutic relationships. Share it with someone who needs validation that their discomfort is worth listening to. Subscribe to our channel for more content that illuminates the shadows of psychological manipulation and provides resources for authentic healing. Drop a comment below if you've noticed any red flags in your own therapeutic experiences. Your insight might help someone else recognize their situation. Remember, good therapy should expand your world, not shrink it, strengthen your voice, not silence it, and ultimately lead to greater autonomy, not dependency. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong in your therapeutic relationship, it probably is. You deserve healing that honors your wholeness, recognizes your agency, and respects your boundaries. Thank you for watching this difficult but important story. Until next time, stay kind, stay sharp, and stay curious.